Oh, guys, I am so stoked right now. And I'm sure from looking at the box and from the title video, you know exactly why. And I'm sure you are stoked too, because you might be getting one soon, or you're just excited to see them back. This is going to be a first impressions video on the Microtech Socom Elite. One of my all-time favorite blades. This guy is just amazing. There are just so many good things to talk about. I just want to set some, as Nothing Fancy says, some ground rules. This is not going to be a review. This is going to be a first impressions, just what I've noticed. This is my first day owning it. Just some things I've noticed that are maybe different from the original Microtech Socom. And so first off, I want to tell you what's the same. What's the same is that it's still friggin' awesome so far. It's got the same great deployment. It's got a free dropping action on a thumb stud knife, not even a flipper knife. It's just got great looks, great ergonomics. I'm going to do a full review on this guy, especially once I get the next version that comes out. This one is just the only one that's been released. You can still find them from certain Microtech dealers. This is the Tanto Stonewash blade with the black handle. There are going to be more versions available. I'm going to be picking up a satin and OD green. I have a dealer that's going to message me the moment it comes in. So anyway, let's start talking about what's different about this blade. I'm going to talk about blade steel briefly. It's M390 instead of S35VN, and I think 204P. Those were the two blade steels that were used on the 2011-2012 runs. M390 is a great steel. Nothing much to say there. One thing that I think is really interesting is the handle material that they've switched to. So, the original Socoms were in 6061 T6 aluminum, and these are in 7075 T6 aluminum. Now, 6061 is pretty standard throughout the knife industry. Benchmade 940, the Makusta Katana, the LUDT, the Microtech LUDT, out the front, it's pretty much any knife that has aluminum on it that's a good knife is going to be in 6061 T6 aluminum. This is the only knife that I've seen in 7075 T6, and I think that it's really cool. I did a little bit of research, and 7075 T6 aluminum is basically just a lot stronger, a lot more durable, a lot more wear resistant than 6061, and it doesn't add anything in weight. So this knife is the same weight as the previous version. I thought it was going to be a little bit heavier, honestly, because I think this one is 5.6, but then I looked at the older versions, and they said 5.6 or somewhere around that league. So you're not really going to have a compromise. They just made the aluminum out of something, or they used a different type of aluminum. Now, I'm going to talk real quick about why I think that is. And this is just speculation. So, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the old Microtech Socoms had really late lockup. I'm talking like 90 to 100%. And most of the time, I can't tell if that was from design or not, because it didn't really cause any problems. There was no lock rock, there was no side to side play. It was fine. It just locked up late. I'm speculating that it locked up fine still because it's just a good knife, but that one of the reasons that it locked up late was because the stop pin on this knife is a thumb studs, and it stops up against, you can see here, just the aluminum. So I'm guessing that on the older versions, it would actually wear into the aluminum, and that's what would cause the lock to need to move over. That's just speculation. I know that there's not going to be a problem with that with this new aluminum. From what I've read, it is super strong, and so that's not going to be a problem having the external stop pin on the aluminum now. And you can tell that this guy definitely has earlier lockup than, whoa, that almost cut my thumb there. It has earlier lockup than the original model of the Socom Elite. It's also a lot more expensive from my research, but this knife is still coming in at the exact same price of $270, and I think that's just an excellent thing. They upped the aluminum, the price didn't change, all right, and the steel. Cool, good on you, Microtech. So another thing that they changed are the inserts, actually. The inserts on this one is kind of like a track tech material, and if you've ever owned or carried or held a Kershaw Blur, it's pretty much that material. So they've gone away from kind of the sandpaper material or the skateboard tape to kind of this rubbery texture. I honestly kind of prefer the sandpaper texture, but this is not bad at all, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will like it because maybe it's not tearing up your hands or something. Another thing, kind of along the same line, is they do not have a insert on the lock side, and I think that's because of the screws right here, not necessarily this big thing jutting out, which houses the complicated part of the sub liner lock or inset liner lock, whatever it's called. But now it's screwed in. Before it was not. Before you would see a little bit of a tab, but it was not screwed into the handle. I know this because I took apart, kind of unintentionally, my 2012 Socom Elite. I just unscrewed the blade. I forget why. I think I sharpened it and I wanted to clean it. And so I was able to find a way to unscrew the pivot. And then as I was popping the blade out, which I was not able to do because it's captive, but as I was pulling the blade out, the liner lock actually popped out. Because since the blade moved, it went to 100%, and then the inside of this liner lock just kind of like shot out. So it took me about a week to find a way to be able to inset that back in and move the blade over it. I had inset it perfectly because there was a spring that was lying underneath the liner lock. It was a pain. It was a huge pain. But, you know, there aren't going to be any more problems with that for two reasons. One, because they have the liner lock screwed in, but also because this is on TORX, and that's awesome. I love the look of Microtech proprietary hardware. I think that's one of the reasons why they use it. I think another reason is because, especially with their OTFs, they don't want them taken apart. But I'm glad that they have TORX. I'm glad that I can maintain this knife if I so desire. What else is there? The blade shapes are different. So this is a different kind of blade shape than the previous Tanto. If I'm correct, the previous Tanto the swedge kind of went out closer to the tip and it made it look kind of cool. This doesn't look bad, but it's not the same blade shape. Same with the clip. The clip is similar to the Tanto in that the grind, the main bevel, or the main bevel here starts a little bit lower on the blade. It's not so much of a high grind as the old ones. I'm not super thrilled about that, for being honest here. So the old ones, the flat kind of ran up to about this point on the blade, and on the new clip points, they are kind of like this Tanto where it just runs down the middle. What that means is it's going to take a little bit longer, or it's going to take a little bit more for the edge to get thin. And I mean, this edge is not going to get thin one way or the other. It's going to be thick. It just depends on how thick. And right now, this guy is pretty thick. It reminds me of a XM18 Spanto blade, but that's okay. This isn't supposed to be the world's greatest slicer. It slices fine. I've had to cut cardboard with it already today, and I didn't really have any problems. I mean, I could tell that it was a little bit thicker. It didn't necessarily slice like my mini TORX or anything, but it sliced fine, and it's going to be a little bit chunky, and the clip point is going to be a little bit chunkier than the old clip point because the blade shapes look a little bit different. I also kind of prefer the old look of the clip point blade shape, but the new one looks really interesting too. You can take a look at those guys on Microtech's website if you like. So one thing I also want to talk about was the kind of the protrusions on this side of the handle. It doesn't bother me. I think it looks kind of cool and technical, but you can see there's a little protrusion here for the lock bar and down here for the, well, lock bar, but different part of the lock bar. Another thing that I think is interesting is they have an insert here, and I think that further kind of solidifies my speculation. It gives proof to my speculation that the lockup wasn't supposed to be that late on the Socoms. So maybe it was a heavy blade, it was wearing on the lock, and it was wearing on the handle, and so they made changes to that. And if that's the case, then, I mean, good on Microtech for finding ways around, you know, some problems that arose. They did not find a way around the tip-down carry, but, I mean, I didn't really expect as much, if we're being honest here. one thing I wanted to look at is down here in the bearings. I don't know how well you can, or I say bearings, I don't know how well you can see. Maybe if this might get really weird, guys, real quick. I'm just going to kind of move my light source a little bit there. You can kind of see in there. I can't tell right now what type of pivot system this is on. If those are like some weird washers, or if they're like ball bearings, but the ball bearings are inset in the blade and then inset in the handle. Or if they're kind of like on the mud, the Hawk mud, and they're kind of like sealed in some sort of ring. I can't really tell what's going on. Of course, before I do a full review on this knife, I will take it apart and kind of see what makes it tick. Sorry, having to put my light source back. Here, stare at the knife for a second. There we go. So, I mean, I don't really know what type of system that is, but, I mean, whatever it is giving it nice action for sure. No doubt about that. And like I said, ergonomics are great. Pretty much everything that made the old Socom so great is still here. And, you know, a little bit more. I like that they kind of upgraded the material. I think it's really cool to have a knife in 7075 T6 aluminum. I think it's really cool just to own a knife in that handle material, because like I said, the only aluminum other than crap aluminum that I've seen on a knife is 6061. Of course, your blade centering's all good. No blade play. The glass breaker is about the same. It's really rounded off. There's no wiggle on it. They got this lanyard hole here. I don't know if that's new. Probably should have researched that. I don't really like how there's a cutout for it, but it doesn't bother me too much. Not nearly as much as it would bother Nick Shabazz. But this knife is also kind of special to me. You can see here the date is February 2nd, 2018. And I actually bought this knife. I didn't know it at the time, but the next day I researched. And I bought this knife on the exact day that I bought my first high quality knife, but, you know, 3 years later. So the first knife that kind of got me into the hobby was the Kershaw Blur, and I got that February 19th, 2015, and I purchased this knife February 19th, 2018. So I think that is pretty cool, and that adds some nice kind of sentimental value. But like I said, I'm going to be getting an olive drab and clip point version as soon as it becomes available. I think that's going to be the primary version and the one I'd recommend. This is going to be, I'm just going to have two, because that's how much I love the Socom, and I think that this is still looking to be just as great, if not better, as the original Socom. So I'm just going to have two. This one can be my work knife, my beater. I mean, I know that just like a tactical knife, that beater term is kind of starting to lose its meaning. But this is going to be the one where if I'm having to do, I will not be afraid to cut through a tin can with this knife and get the blade all scratched up, because I have a clip point that's kind of my preferred EDC right there. And this guy is stick behind the edge, it can handle it, and it would just be cool to use and to kind of mark up. I don't know if that makes any of y'all cringe or whatever, but yeah, so that was just the first impressions. I'm going to be doing a full video on that once I have my clip point, and once I, you know, have carried enough, spent the time to take it apart, see what makes it tick. So I will see you guys in the next video.